It's something that we've put together really about learning from experience, learning by doing. It's absolutely not meant to be a recipe, it's a guidance, it's something that needs to be locally thought about in the context within which you come from. But it's what we're going to focus on the first part of this workshop on. And then we're going to move into the table discussion. And on your tables, hopefully all of you have got access to a copy of something that's really, the ink is still wet on this. I've been in a darkened room thinking about this for a couple of weeks or so, and I thought, well, as I've got a critical audience, critical friends in the audience in front of me, I should use you to have a think about and test this for me. So more of that in a little while. And then absolutely essentially, we thought it was important we brought this work to life. And Andrew Foster, what better speaker to help bring some of this to life? Particularly interestingly, I don't know if you'd arrived in time, but there was a conversation going this morning, Andrew, about the business case for quality. And particularly I know your presentation will speak quite a bit to that. And then time at the end for some Q&A, if you've got some questions for us. So I thought it was interesting just to lead on the context. We know, don't we, that there's an awful lot of attention now around quality improvement and improvement approaches and continuous improvement. And I'm delighted, AQuA's been delighted to see the plethora of literature that has come out from the national bodies and from those thought leaders, but as well as that from the regulatory space, whether that's CQC, looking through the key lines of inquiry around well-led, about the evidence for leadership, for continuous improvement, or whether it's about NHS improvement, thinking about how do you apply a dosing model and formula to building capability and capacity in your organisations. There's no shortage of guidance and support information in this space. However, what we were hearing from many of the members in AQuA was, well, yes, but how do we actually integrate some of that into a model that we can start mobilising and making real on the ground? Hence this document was born. And it's a collective of thinking. It's something that we've used our own membership to take advice from, and it's a distillation of both desk-based research and the experiences of those organisations who are living and breathing this every day. So I hope you'll have a chance to read it and find it useful. I'm not going to go around each and every domain in a lot of detail, because I know David did cover some of that this morning, but I am going to pose for us some of the questions that each of the domains ask of us when we're thinking about our strategies for improvement and our quality strategies in our organisations. And it's an interesting first test, really, how many of you would say that you could identify the existence of a quality or improvement strategy within your own organisations at the moment. Would it be visible? Would it be clear for everybody where that was and what it said? And as David was saying, this is about a long-term commitment. This is about the board really illustrating a compelling vision within their quality strategy for what quality means to all. And interestingly, we set some questions after each domain of our work, of our framework, and said, well, what might be the key tests? What might be some of the questions you'd ask against each of these 5 domains? And I think it's useful just to address some of these and be thinking about them as we go through this morning. So as I say, do you feel that you could test your quality strategy and see a clear vision in it that's understood by all? Would you understand that there were a few bold aims with a measurement strategy and a reporting system against them that are actually understood by all the stakeholders who bought in at every level of the organisation? And is there a commitment to actually identify a coherent improvement method and for that method to be developed and widespread across all the workforce? Because in effect, If you've got a strategy without the means to mobilise it and make it live on the ground, then it's purely an academic exercise. Likewise, if you've got a capability building programme without a strategy, you're in danger of sheep dipping and having isolated mini projects which don't convene into a system model. So we've talked a lot about leadership and culture, and we've talked about the importance of leadership at every level and the engagement of both stakeholders and staff in that leadership vision. But, you know, would you be able to say that your board agenda and your senior leadership team places as much priority on quality matters as they do on the finance and operational performance? I don't know. I've observed quite a lot of board discussions, and whilst I think the conversation is starting to mobilise towards quality being of equal priority, I think there's still a journey to go. And how does the board actually become approachable by the whole organisation? How visible are the board in the improvement efforts that are underway? Are they being sponsored and supported by an executive on all occasions? Is the executive and the senior leadership actively part of the improvement team? How are they removing the barriers and the challenges that often get in the way of frontline staff doing their improvement job? And how are we triangulating the data that we get from the very many sources around how well we're doing? The hard data from staff surveys, from culture surveys, from HR instruments. We need to triangulate all of those as we understand the culture that is pervasive throughout our organisations. Now, on capability, I suspect if I asked you, many of you have probably personally gone through some training in QI. Can I just take a bit of a straw poll on that? How many actually have in the room? So, probably about half. And half therefore haven't. And you are guys and girls who've committed to come today to a QI conference. So that's really interesting. I'm talking to the converted in this audience, and we're probably about 50-50. So what I would say is, we would think that it's really, really important for organisations to ask of themselves of the improvement approach that they've chosen. And I think David was making the point this morning, AQuA would certainly not be saying, oh, you must follow the model for improvement, or you must follow microsystems work, etc. The point is, it's important the organisation selects an improvement methodology and consistently applies it everywhere. But do we often actually identify and understand which staff we have in our organisations with existing skills? Do we know where they are? Do we track them? Do we support them? Do we convene them around the challenges the organisation has for improvement? And do we ever actually understand how many people we need at different levels of the organisation? How many experts we need who might advise and oversee the whole organisation's improvement endeavours, and how many staff have to have a literacy and a knowledge at the front line? And we call that, don't we, often what we describe as a dosing model. And certainly AQuA, you'll be getting all these slides, you'll be able to see them in more detail after the conference, but AQuA's been using something that I think Kaiser Permanente actually introduced a good while ago, this pyramidal approach, a dosing formulary. But we've also applied some of the language that individuals would use when they were thinking about their position here. So if you were thinking about the expert level there, well, we would see these individuals as improvement beacons. They can identify the needs of the organisation in relation to the workforce. And the individual might say, I can manage complex consultation and engagement, I can define the needs of the organisation, and there are I can statements all the way down. And I think often the pyramids I've seen with dosing models against them often don't translate into individual language like that, so hopefully you find that of some interest. Now again, David spent some time this morning talking about developing an operating system, and also about the actual support services and what they needed to do. In terms of the operating system, we might think about this in terms of whether or not we've considered aligning our chosen improvement approach with the most important organisational priorities. So, do we have a disparate group of improvement projects, which are great, and they're all doing small tests of change, and they're all locally driving improvement, but how many of them are actually aligned in a cascade up to the big corporate goals? How many of them can you see as a cascade? And you remember David talked about the catch-ball approach. So once the board has set the corporate objectives and the clear big dot goals, as we sometimes call them, do our individual improvement teams align their efforts up to those so that every day everyone understands how their job improves towards the corporate goals? And likewise, we did touch, didn't we, on aligning support services. And our observation is that very few organisations have actually got into this space. Very few have thought about the unintended consequences, is if you've got an improvement work being driven, and yet perhaps HR are recruiting staff not necessarily for the values of the continuous improvement, but for other standards or other requirements. So it's important that both estates, information, finance and our HR services are not only trained in the improvement methodologies and approaches, but they understand that if frontline teams don't have great information and data available to them, they can't track their improvement efforts. If the finance department is wholly and only focused in on cash releasing savings and not on the consequences of the quality of what might happen as an impact to the patient from taking resources out, then again you've got a system that may well have unintended consequences. And there are some questions there that we would pose of those particular support services within the framework. But the bit I want us to spend some time on, because you've been sat listening all morning, and I think it's good to get some conversation going, to be honest with you. What you will find on your tables is something that is emergent, and it's taking some of the work that's in the guide document, and it's saying, how can we make this a live document and useful in the field, within an organisation, within your organisations? How can we bring it to life? And what we've attempted to do is, against each of the 5 domains, we've thought about a maturity scale, which takes us from a level 1, which is about your intentions to adopt, you're thinking about this, you're in the adopting space, right through from implementing, embedding, and finally to spreading. Now, we're not saying that of those 5 domains there's a particular sequence to this. We don't say you have to do one before you can move on to another. In essence, I think to have a culture and a system for continuous improvement, what all we're saying is you should have them all present. But this is something that we think might be useful in the field, and we've developed a series of prompts or questions alongside each of the stages of the framework. Now, there's a lot of words on that page and they're pretty diddy, and somebody like me who needs their glasses is recognising that it is a busy template. But I'd like to invite you at your tables, either as a collective or with your partner sat next to you, just to have a look at this. Spend a few minutes acquainting yourselves with it. Perhaps pick one of the domains, because you can't do it all in the time we've got. Have a look at it and think to yourself, well, if I were back in my organisation, how useful do I think this would be? Either for me as an individual who might be a quality improvement lead. I was speaking to a colleague from Dudley just a moment ago, and you were saying you are the single improvement person in your organisation, and it might feel a bit lonely. So you might be looking at this framework as an individual. You might be deploying the framework within a team. You might be deploying it at the board or senior leadership team level. But if you were completing this, where would you think about putting yourselves in terms of your developmental journey? And the opportunity to be able to then plot that for yourselves on a spider plot such as this one enables you to then have a conversation. Well, because it's not a science this, I stress, it's a conversation. Where do we think we've got evidence to support ourselves saying we're at one level or another? What might we need to focus on to give more assurance about that level of attainment? And what, more interestingly, do we need to convene our efforts and energies around to take us to the next level? And I wonder if you would take a few minutes to have a look at this, explore it, discuss it, and then I'm really keen to hear back at the end of Andrew's presentation whether you think this has got miles to run, whether it's got legs, what you think it needs to be, what needs to happen to it next, if you like, for it to become a useful tool for you. Because actually, if it's not a useful tool for you, we shouldn't proceed. But would you have a go at that and see what you think of it? Have a discussion with your neighbour, see what you think.
Do about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes, yes, thank you. But I do want to cut in if I may. One thing I wanted to say before we just get a couple of examples of feedback, because your comments would be really useful, was I did say this is very much an iterative, it's an emergent framework, and I'm inviting any organisations that are here today who would like to stay close to this work, maybe do some testing in their own organisations and giving us some feedback and be part of the next stage of this tool. If you wouldn't mind tapping me on the shoulder at the end, that would be wonderful. You'd be most welcome, whether you are an AQuA membership or not, it's irrelevant. I'm really keen to work with the willing and whoever's got energy for this. But can we just, before I do hand over to Andrew, who's going to bring a lot of this work to life and the realities of what it takes in the field to do this sort of thing, can I take a couple of observations or thoughts from any of the tables, if you've got any at this point? I know I've not given you long with it. Yes, there's a mic just coming to you.
Oh, thank you. Hi, I'm Claire Dusop. I'm a consultant at Sheffield Teaching Hospital,
oh, right, hi.
And I'm a clinical lead in the QI department for a specific programme. And I was just saying to David that we obviously have a quite a highly developed QI department with the Microsystems Academy. There's a reasonably big faculty, and just recently appointed OD that's on the exec team, so it's quite visible. But yet still some of the capability building, we are not quite pushing it to the levels that some other organisations have done. And this has really helped me see that quite clearly, because you'd expect that our department was ticking all the boxes, but actually it's really clear that we're not, especially around capability.
Right.
Perhaps maybe support services have also been a bit neglected.
So it's shown a sort of an illumination.
Yeah, it definitely shines a light.
And you are a very
yes.
well-developed system.
Well, exactly.
Absolutely.
But I think sometimes the danger in that is that you sort of think, oh well, someone's on it, someone's dealing with all that. I don't need to be involved in that because there's a big department and they're sorting it all out.
And who would you envisage using a tool like that with in an organisation like Sheffield?
Well, I mean, I personally think this, I'm going to take this straight back to our OD to discuss, because I'm involved in a project that really needs everybody on the coalface to be involved. And David was saying that when he was chief exec at Bolton, they had an idea, a vision that everybody should be trained in QI, and I absolutely agree with that. I think we do a lot of the time think we haven't really got the time to have a member involved and somebody else will do that, and actually that doesn't work. The quality improvement projects you come up with and reducing waste, they're not as successful and embedded because not everybody's been involved.
Right.
So I will be discussing this with the QI team, but I think the point we need to take it to is what are we going to make our vision? Are we going to make our vision that everybody should be involved in QI in one way or another? Because I think otherwise you'll have pockets of untouched areas in the trust, and especially in a big trust.
Really helpful. Thank you for those comments. Anybody else want to offer comments or reflection at this point? Yes, lady at the end.
Hi, I'm Karen, I'm from Royal Papworth Hospital in Cambridge, and we are known as a world leader and an innovator in our clinical care and service delivery. But actually, you know, looking at this, I would say that from our leadership and culture, we are in the early stages of implementation. And in terms of capability, we're only at the adopting stage. So we are very much at the beginning of our journey.
And an instrument like this, do you think it would have value in the field?
I think it would be very interesting to see what our board thought about where they were with quality improvement. We had the opportunity to have the Sheffield team come down to Royal Papworth last year. We had 2 days worth of training, which was very inspiring, a little bit daunting because we realised how far we had to go, but it was an excellent 2 days, and we've taken a lot from that to take us forward. So I would recommend anybody who's not approached Sheffield to think about it.
There you go. Excellent.
Great one, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's been, one last one here then. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Rhoda Runley from Oxley's NHS Foundation Trust in South East London. We're very early on, and I think this is quite helpful, so thank you for actually putting this together. And we've just, our board has just agreed our business case on QI. And when we look at this, I think, just listen to Sheffield, who's done it for a longer period of time. We've got a long way to go. So it just makes me realise, it just helps crystallise the amount of work we need to do to make sure we embed this. Because I think what normally happens in organisations, you hear that, okay, QI is the way forward, this is what we need to do within the NHS, make change happen, but we don't do it in the right way, in the right structure. What this does, I think, for other organisations who sees this, that actually there is something you need to follow that will help you make sure that there will be success at the end. Because what will normally happen, we might adopt and do a little bit of implementing and then stop. But this helps us see actually how do we make sure it's embedded and spread across the organisation. So that it's something that I think is brilliant.
Thank you very much for that. That's really helpful feedback. And as I say, see me at the end if you'd like to buddy up.